Hi, welcome back to Do Fix Differently. We want to do things a little bit differently in this video, and we're going to split it up into a two-parter. We want to talk about the factors influencing your initial onboard of a customer. That's what we're going to focus on in this video. And then factors influencing your long-term agility and ability to support customers long-term. That's the next video. And the reason why we're doing these as two parts is because actually they tie back to the same underlying concepts. So it's going to be quite a theoretical video, this one. We've even got a graph to prove it. But we'll tie the two together, because actually what you'll see is that there's a big trade-off between getting a fast initial onboard and the long-term support, the long-term agility. I don't want to spoil the plot for you though, so let's get cracking on setting out some of the theoretical foundations of this. So this focuses mostly around flexibility of the API. So you hear me say time and time again that banks do a lot of this. They start to offer customizations of their APIs, perhaps because the customer can't actually support a piece of functionality right up front. And they're doing that because they think that this is going to reduce the initial onboard. And so I wanted to put this into more of a theoretical basis. And so I've tried to sketch this out on a graph, as you'll see here. So we've got an x-axis, and on this x-axis what we're showing is the level of flexibility that's offered by that particular destination. So it ranges all the way from you must code perfectly to us on the one hand, all the way to it's a free-for-all. There is no API document. You send us whatever you want on the other side. Now, I'm not suggesting that anybody really gets quite to that extreme, but hopefully you can understand the idea of the spectrum. In between these 2 points, you have a variety of different common places that people try to get to. I've marked one of them here as called Custom Algo 1, and that's trying to identify the idea that a lot of brokers use around their algos, where typically what they do is they have slots. And they say, okay, there's this thing called Custom Algo 1. And when I receive it from you, customer A, I'm going to interpret that like this. And when I receive that same instruction from customer B, I'm going to interpret it in a completely different way over there, right? So really what they're doing is they've put these predefined slots in, and that drives a series of internal customizations under the covers. It's a way of kind of getting almost pre-packaged flexibility, if you like, without offering entirely bespoke levels of customization. So that's what I'm calling a Custom Algo 1 spot. There's another extreme, which is people say, well, we kind of don't have a spec. You just send us the fixed standards. First of all, I call their bluff on that. I don't think they actually do support the entire fixed standards. Really what they're saying is send us something sensible and we'll probably respond correctly. But much like a duck going across a pond, they're paddling like crazy under the covers to try to keep up with that as it goes. But nonetheless, the idea of this x-axis is that it's a spectrum of flexibility. On the y-axis, you just see a high and a low. So this is what we're going to do on this graph, is we're going to plot the initial time of onboard from high to low as we move across that spectrum of flexibility. So this is quite a subjective high and low value, and I'll talk a little bit later about the various different influences on this. But if we start off by drawing this graph, what you'd expect is that if you ask somebody to code perfectly to your API, then that's probably going to be one of the highest durations that you've got. So start off on the x-axis rather than on the left-hand side here, you're going to have a very high value for onboarding. As you start to offer some level of flexibility to the customer, you get a series of quick wins, essentially. So the speed of the initial onboard goes up, so that the time to onboard actually comes down. So you see it drop quite sharply there as you start to burn through all of these quick wins. Then actually the marginal benefit starts to level off a bit. You've gone through all the quick wins, things become quite difficult. Perhaps you have to take on far more internal coding to be able to get that next incremental benefit for customers. And so the speed of onboard doesn't actually increase quite as fast as it used to before. Okay, so you see the curves start to drop off. At some point, as we go further and further towards the right-hand side of this graph, we go more towards the free-for-all. Well, actually the graph starts to go up again, and it starts to go up not really because the recipient of the order, the person who's operating the API, not because they have to do much work, but actually it could just causes confusion on the person who's sending the order in the first place. Imagine you say, well, you've got to come and connect to my API, but I'm not really going to tell you about how it operates at all. Well, that's deeply confusing, isn't it? And so that's going to cause people to spin on the other side. And that's the reason why the graph starts to take off again as you go further and further to the right-hand side. So we've got this U shape in terms of the graph. Actually, it's probably slightly skewed a little bit, as you see here in this graph, but nonetheless, it is a U shape. So it would be quite kind of easy for people to look at this and say, well, this is an argument for flexibility, right? You add in the flexibility and you get down. And so the key thing that we need to do is we need to work out what's the lowest possible point on this graph, and that's the thing that we should be really targeting. Well, that's actually not the whole picture, and that's the reason why we're going to go through the second part of this series here, because it talks about the ongoing agility, and you'll see later on that there's a trade-off between future agility and this. One thing I do want to focus though on before we get to that is to think about various different things that you can do right now to improve this graph on its own, right? So I said that the y-axis was subjective, high and low. Actually, it's not consistent in terms of every single one of your onboards. Some will be faster than others naturally, even though you're doing exactly the same thing. And so I wanted to just give you some tips for or some little factors that might actually influence these things. One of the key things I want to emphasize is the initial onboard is very much a partnership agreement. The time to onboard is exactly the same for both the person sending the order and the person receiving the order, okay? And so both parties are working towards this end goal. It's not the same as agility, and I'll talk about that in a little bit, okay? But there are 10 things that we think that you can do to generally reduce the amount of time taken for an onboard. Number one is it Fix? And I say that not because Fix is necessarily the ideal protocol, it is just because lots of people understand it. And so the chances of somebody being able to connect quickly to a Fix API are significantly higher than if they're dealing with a brand new native API that's only applicable to your particular destination. The second one is, you hear me talk about this a lot, have you got accurate documentation? If your documentation is incorrect or incomplete, or that you've accidentally sent them the wrong version, for example, then we've really got no hope. That's going to take a long time in terms of onboarding. So getting good quality, accurate documentation into your customers' hands as quickly as you can is better. The third one, do you have machine readable documentation? And I mean that because you'll hear from some of my other videos, if you can give somebody something that is structured and complete and easy to copy and paste or transform into some other element of code internally, then that normally accelerates things. So machine readable documentation will definitely move this graph down and give you lower overall onboarding times generally. The fourth thing, make sure the customer is actually development complete before they start certification. There's nothing worse than going into a certification cycle prematurely. You find things, you're finding bugs essentially in the customer's code during certification that really you shouldn't be there. It's wasting your time, it's wasting their time to actually go back through that cycle again and again and again. So instilling some sort of gate system that says, have you actually completed development before you start certification is normally a good thing to do. It's good practice. Talking about practice and process, number 5, it's all about having a clearly well articulated process that the customer understands, right? The absolutely best thing that you can do for a customer when they're about to onboard is send them a welcome pack with everything that they need, all well defined, all right in front of them. If you need some pieces of information from them in terms of completing the activity, you should ask that once up front and make sure that your entire process down there all flows automatically. It's preferably automated. So good process, clear process, automated process, all of these things help a lot in reducing the onboarding time. Number 6, are you using standard workflows? I come back to this time and time again. If you're using standard Fix workflows, it's going to be significantly easier from if you've deviated and you're using something a little bit strange. Again, sticking to the standard Fix tags if you can, sticking to standard Fix enumerations if you can. These things will all help significantly. Number 7, I can't say it enough. Example. You have to put examples into your documentation. You have to put examples of both messages, fields, enumerations, workflows. These things are really, really important. And these are things that your customers are going to want to try to pick up and put into their code to get them going as quickly as you possibly can. Number 8, Something that's possibly often overlooked is a stable environment. We hear a lot of people complain that actually their onboard would have gone faster, but the environment wasn't available, or it's not available at the time that my coders wanted to use it. And remember, a lot of people offshored some of these functions right now, so you might be sitting in London thinking, oh great, my UAT environment is available 9 to 5 London time, but actually that doesn't help a developer who's over in China because it's completely inappropriate time for them. Number 9, answers. Is there an answer or knowledge base that people can go to at any point and get the answers that they actually need for the common questions? Okay, we find that a lot of people don't tend to read documentation. We've all kind of been trained out of the idea of sitting down and reading a 100-page document. We're all very keen now on search engines like Google to give us the answer that on demand. Okay, if you can build up a knowledge base of answers around your API and give that to customers, that's really going to help them find the problems, self-serve them, and get moving much faster. It's going to reduce your effort as well, which is a great double bonus. Okay. Number 10, make it somebody's job. That's a really strange thing to say, but in other videos we've talked about the confluence of production support and onboarding, and actually the function that actually always gets hurt by that is onboarding, because production always trumps onboarding, right? So the more you spread your people out across production support versus onboarding, the more likely it is that onboarding projects are just generally going to go slower because you don't have the time to be able to focus on it. Okay, so make it somebody's job to focus on onboarding, try to get other work off their plates, allow them to focus on it. So those are 10 things that allow you to make the initial onboard go a little bit faster. Join me in the next video then. We're going to talk about the next step. Once you've actually got the customer on board, how do you manage future agility? How do you get that down as low as you can? So see you next time.